My name is Carol. I'm Brian's mother, though you wouldn't know it if you were at his wedding last Saturday. They sat me down in the kitchen, not near it, not beside a wall with a view of the dance floor. No. They put me behind the swinging door next to a tray of shrimp cocktail and a garbage bin that hadn't been emptied. The chair wobbled when I sat, and a damp paper napkin had been tossed over the cushion like an afterthought. The scent of kitchen grease and citrus disinfectant clung to the air. Every few minutes, the door would swing open and hit the wall with a hollow bang, revealing flashes of golden light and people laughing. It reminded me of when I used to stand outside Brian's bedroom listening to him play with his toys, hoping one day I'd be invited into that world. That day never really came. And now here I was, the woman who raised him, sitting between a stack of trays and a cart of dirty dishes. I wore the dress I'd picked out 2 months ago, soft rose-coloured silk with a thin beaded neckline. It was the same shade Melissa had once said she liked back when she still pretended to respect me. My hair had been done at 8 a.m. that morning. It took 3 hours. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I thought for just one day I'd be allowed to feel beautiful. I had hoped Brian would see me, maybe hug me, maybe thank me. But when I arrived, he didn't even look in my direction. He was standing with Melissa's parents laughing as her mother kissed his cheek. Like she was the one who stayed up with him during asthma attacks. Like she was the one who worked weekends at the grocery store to pay for braces. She never packed his lunches or bought second-hand coats to save enough for his chess camp. I did that. Every bit of it. A young staffer walked past me, startled when he saw me already seated. He hesitated, then mumbled that the bride had asked me to wait back here. Something about the aesthetic of the photos. I just nodded. I didn't want to make a scene. Not today. Not on his day. They served me cold chicken on a chipped plate. A side of carrots that tasted like the inside of a microwave. I didn't eat. I just picked at the napkin, folded it into smaller and smaller pieces, as if I could fold away my feelings too. Through the door, I could hear the first toast. Melissa's father. His voice was loud and sure, like he believed he owned the moment. He welcomed Brian into their family and said Melissa had finally found her prince. I couldn't see their faces, but I could picture them standing there, arm in arm under those soft lights. The same lights I paid for. No one said my name. Not in the program. Not in the speeches. Not even in passing. I was a wallet, not a guest. A necessary transaction with no emotional return. A fixture in the background they needed to keep hidden. I closed my eyes and told myself to smile. Told myself I wouldn't cry. Told myself that mothers are meant to step back, to let go, to be proud from the shadows. But I didn't feel proud. I felt discarded. And that's when something inside me began to shift. Just a little. Quietly. Like the click of a lock turning from the inside. At first, I thought it was a simple mistake. I flipped through the wedding program, slowly letting my eyes trace every line. It was printed on thick cream cardstock, gold embossed with elegant cursive detailing every moment of the ceremony. Melissa's parents were listed right at the top. Her father would walk her down the aisle. Her mother would give the welcome speech. Then the readings, the vows, the exchange of rings. But nowhere, not even in the smallest print at the bottom, was my name. No mention of the mother of the groom. No space for a reading. No thank you note. I turned the card over, hoping maybe something had been added to the back. Just the dinner menu. Chicken or vegetarian. I told myself it didn't matter. That maybe they wanted something streamlined. But then the music started, and Melissa's mother took the microphone. She stood confidently at the head table, dressed in deep navy satin pearls around her neck. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about raising a daughter with grace and vision. She said how lucky they felt to welcome Brian into their family. The room applauded, and I stayed seated in my folding chair, hands clasped tightly in my lap. My heart thudded slow and heavy, like it didn't want to be there either. I looked around, hoping someone might glance back, Someone might notice the empty seat beside me. No one did. I wasn't included in the photos. No one asked me to stand with the family. There was no mother-son dance, no private moment, just silence like I had been written out before the ink had dried. I had asked gently weeks ago, wondering if Brian and I would have a dance together. He smiled, tight, said they were doing things a little differently. He said Melissa had a vision. I told him I understood. I always did. But sitting there, hearing the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the music rising and falling without me, I realized something deeper. I hadn't just been overlooked. I had been erased. They planned this, chose this, decided that I didn't fit into their perfect image. I was too old, too tired, too inconvenient. A woman who worked double shifts, who wore sneakers to PTA meetings, who packed peanut butter sandwiches with notes tucked inside. Now I was no one. Not mother, not guest. Just a shadow in the corner watching the world I built celebrate without me. I kept a spreadsheet for the wedding. Not because I needed to, but because it helped me stay grounded. Every flower, every chair, every slice of cake had a line and a cost. The invitations alone were nearly $500. Melissa wanted hand-calligraphed envelopes from a boutique vendor in Vermont. She said it added a touch of elegance. The venue upgrade came next. We moved from the church hall to a refurbished barn with chandeliers and antique whiskey barrels. It was triple the price, but I said yes. She called it elevated. There were charges for each place setting. Gold ones, because silver looked too cold, she said. Then the custom cocktail menu, the floral arch, and the neon sign that read, "Forever starts now." All of it billed to my card. I never asked for help. I didn't expect it. I wanted Brian to have a wedding that felt like everything I couldn't afford when I was raising him alone. But then a few nights before the wedding, I noticed something strange. 2 charges I hadn't approved. One from a trendy bar downtown, the other from a spa just outside the city. I checked the details. A pre-wedding bar crawl and a spa day for 8. Facials, brunch, and champagne. All on my card. I waited for an explanation that never came. Instead, I found a Venmo note Melissa sent to one of her bridesmaids. "His mum is covering everything. Might as well go big. Wedding vibes." That line stuck with me like a splinter. I had offered to help, but they had taken. Without asking. Without thanks. I scrolled back through the spreadsheet, each row now tinged with something sour. The dress fitting, the linen upgrades, the dessert bar replaced the standard cake. All decisions were made without me, but paid for by me. The generosity I once felt proud of now felt like a joke, like I'd been cast as the silent sponsor in someone else's fairy tale. A walking wallet in nude heels. I sat in the hotel room that night and looked at the total. Tens of thousands of dollars. Months of work. Years of savings. And not once in all the planning had anyone asked what I wanted, what I needed. I wasn't part of the dream. I was just the one funding it. And for the first time, I started to wonder if I'd been a fool. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the hotel bed, still in my dress, watching the ceiling fan spin above me like it was counting time I would never get back. The smell of kitchen grease clung to my hair, and my shoes were still on, even though my feet had been throbbing for hours. Sometime around 4, I sat up and turned on the lamp. The light was harsh, but I welcomed it. It helped me stay focused. I reached for my tablet and opened the spreadsheet. All the numbers were still there, lined up neatly. Total spent. Vendors confirmed. Balances due. I scrolled to the bottom and tapped open a separate list I had made but never thought I'd need. It was a list of phone numbers. The florist, the band, the catering manager, just in case. My hand hovered over the screen for a second. Then I tapped the first number. The florist answered on the 3rd ring. I kept it short. "We no longer need the arrangements for the Sunday brunch. Please cancel the delivery." He asked if something had happened. I told him no explanation was necessary. "Thank you for your time." Then I called the band. The second set for the late-night set list was still unpaid. I told them to consider the booking closed. No follow-up was needed. They paused, said they had already begun setting up the sound equipment. I said I understood. This was just a change in schedule. The last call was the bar service. They were contracted until midnight. 2 bartenders, a custom cocktail menu, and a signature drink Brian had insisted on. I told them the second shift would no longer be needed. Please cancel the balance. There was silence on the line. Then a polite acknowledgement. We'll send an updated invoice. When I hung up, I expected guilt or regret. Maybe the shaky anxiety that always came after I made a big decision. But I felt none of that. What I felt instead was quiet, stillness, the kind that settles not just in a room, but deep inside your chest. I looked down at my hands. They weren't trembling. My breathing was steady. My shoulders, always so tight, had dropped just a little. It surprised me how calm I was. But maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. I had spent so long trying to be generous, to be agreeable, to not make waves. And now I had finally drawn a line. No yelling, no drama, just 3 calls. 3 precise, controlled decisions to take back the pieces of myself they had used without thanks. Not revenge, not anger, just clarity. I sat back against the pillows and closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. I didn't feel small. I felt like someone who had remembered her own name. Someone who had finally said without saying a word enough. The house felt colder than I remembered. The curtains were still drawn from the night before, and the morning sun filtered through in dull streaks. I didn't turn on the lights. I went straight to the bedroom. In the bottom drawer of the old dresser, beneath a stack of insurance papers and tax returns, was the red folder I hadn't touched in years. I pulled it out and sat on the edge of the bed. The envelope was there, tucked between old receipts and a faded photo strip of Brian at a school carnival. Yellowed at the edges, sealed but soft from being handled too many times. My name was written on the front in Michael's familiar handwriting. He had mailed it weeks before he died. I hadn't opened it then. I wasn't ready to hear whatever excuses he had left behind. But now I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the letter. The handwriting wavered in places. He must have written it while sick. The words began with hesitation, then settled into something steadier. He told me Brian wasn't mine, not by blood, not even by accident. He said that when Emily came to him pregnant and scared, she begged him to help. She didn't want the baby. She couldn't keep him. So Michael brought Brian home and told me he was ours, said it was a mistake from before we met. I believed him. I raised that boy like he was my own. I sat through colic nights, taught him to read, scraped together enough for every school field trip. I fought for him in ways no one ever fought for me. And all the while I never knew the truth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there with the letter in my lap and let the words sink into my skin. It wasn't betrayal I felt. Not exactly. It was something colder, something that sounded like silence. I thought about the wedding, about the kitchen chair, about the way Brian had looked through me like I was a distant relative. And then I understood. I had been a placeholder in someone else's story, but I was the one who did the living, the one who stayed. And now I was finally seeing it all for what it was. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when he knocked. Not loud, just firm enough to let me know he wasn't leaving. I stood in the hallway barefoot, watching his shape through the frosted glass. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just opened the door. Brian looked the same, but not really. His shirt was wrinkled, and the bags under his eyes told me sleep hadn't come easily. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. His eyes scanned the living room, pausing where the family photos used to be. The mantel was bare. The hallway walls were empty. There were no smiling faces, no childhood memories frozen in frames. Just a clean, quiet space. He didn't ask where they went. Not yet. He sat down on the edge of the couch, hands clasped like he was waiting for a sentence to be handed down. I walked to the closet and pulled out the box. It was plain brown and taped once across the top. I set it on the coffee table between us. He looked at it, then up at me. I said nothing. After a few seconds, he peeled back the tape. Inside were receipts, printed invoices, deposit confirmations. All the costs of a wedding are built on silence. Next to them, placed neatly on top, was the letter. His father's handwriting stared up from the page like a second confrontation, one from the past, one he couldn't argue with. He lifted it, but didn't open it right away. He glanced at me again, searching for something in my face. I gave him nothing. He finally unfolded the paper, eyes moving fast at first, then slower. I watched the shift in his jaw, the way his lips tightened. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice cracked. "You knew." I nodded once. "Now I do." He swallowed hard. I thought he might say he was sorry, but the words never came. Instead, I stepped forward and pushed the box gently toward him. "These are yours. I've carried them long enough." He hesitated, then picked it up. The weight of it seemed heavier than it should have been. I walked with him to the door. He paused before stepping out, one foot still on the threshold. He turned back like he wanted to ask something, or maybe explain everything in one breath. But I didn't give him the space. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked down, then he walked out. I didn't watch him go. I just closed the door. Quiet. Steady. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like someone hoping to be loved. I felt like someone who had finally stopped waiting. He stood just inside the door, holding that box like it was foreign to him. His fingers tightened around the edges, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. I could tell he had rehearsed something on the way over. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, careful, like he was testing the waters. "I didn't think it would matter. Melissa said it was just for the pictures. I didn't think you'd be hurt." I stared at him. Not with anger, just stillness. The kind that settles after a storm when all that's left is what didn't survive. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I only took one step closer and looked him in the face, the same face I'd kissed 1,000 times goodnight. "You didn't think." I kept my voice calm, flat. That was the part that broke me. Not the omission, not the seating, not even your silence. What broke me was the way you watched it happen and told yourself I'd be fine. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. "I raised you. I built your life from scratch. When there was no one else, I was there. And when the time came to honor that, you sat down and let someone else take my place." He didn't argue, didn't try to explain. His shoulders sank just slightly. I could see it land. The truth. "You erased me," I said. "From the photos, from the speeches, from the memories you're choosing to keep." He stepped back, the box still in his arms. His mouth moved like he wanted to apologize, but the words didn't come. I didn't help him find them. I walked to the door and opened it. The light outside was soft and clear, the kind of light that doesn't lie. He hesitated, standing there like he wanted to ask for something he no longer had a right to. But I didn't offer him a bridge. I didn't offer anything at all. "You were my whole world," I said. "And now finally I'm mine." Then I closed the door. Quietly. Not out of spite. But because the conversation was over. And so was that version of me. The idea came to me the morning after Brian left. I was standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring at the clean counter, when I realized I had nothing planned. No one to cook for, no one to please, just me. So I made a list. Not of chores or bills or errands, just names. People who had shown up in quiet ways. My neighbor who always brought in my mail when I traveled. The nurse who used to slip me extra gloves when I worked nights. A friend from the bookstore who remembered what I liked to read. I didn't call it a party. It wasn't about making a point. I just wanted dinner. Something small. Something mine. That afternoon I went to the farmer's market and picked out whatever caught my eye. Tomatoes that smelled like sunshine. Garlic so fresh it still had dirt clinging to the roots. A loaf of crusty sourdough. No frozen trays. No pre-packaged appetizers. Just food I wanted to cook. I chose a recipe I had seen once on a travel show: lemon butter pasta with roasted cherry tomatoes and a hint of thyme. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just something that made my kitchen smell warm. I bought a new tablecloth, blue with sunflowers. It reminded me of who I used to be, before things got so tangled, before I forgot what it felt like to choose for myself. The morning of the dinner, I put on music. Not the kind you play to impress guests, the kind that makes you hum without realizing it. Van Morrison, Norah Jones, a little Stevie Nicks, the house filled with the scent of olive oil and garlic. I chopped slowly. I stirred without rushing. I set the table with mismatched plates and folded cloth napkins just because it felt right. The first guest arrived a little after 6. She brought wine and a wide smile. "You look lighter," she said. I did. The others followed. Laughter floated in with them. One came with homemade cookies. Another brought a story about locking himself out of his car in pajama pants. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I used to help Brian with his homework. Now it was covered in bowls of salad and bread and pasta. Nothing perfect. Everything real. Someone poured wine. Someone else passed the bread. I didn't hover or apologize. I didn't check my phone. I just sat and ate and listened. And for the first time in a long while, I laughed. Not the polite kind. The kind that made my chest shake. It didn't feel like an event. It felt like coming home to a version of myself I had left behind. A woman who once loved music and sunflowers and cooking without a deadline. There was no toast that night, no photos, no centerpiece, just good food, soft light, and people who looked me in the eye. It was simple. It was enough. And it was mine. The dishes were mostly cleared, and the last bit of pasta had been scraped from the bowl. We sat back in our chairs, glasses half full soft jazz playing low in the background. The string lights I'd draped across the porch flickered gently as the breeze passed through. Claire lifted her glass, her smile wide and easy. She didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. She just leaned forward a little and said, "To Carol, for choosing herself." The table went quiet for a beat. Then came a soft chorus of agreement. Glasses lifted and a few clinked. I felt the warmth rise in my chest, not from the wine, but from the moment. I stood slowly, not to make a speech, just to meet the moment with something real. I looked around the table at these people who had come without obligation, who showed up with stories and cookies and laughter, who didn't ask anything of me except that I be exactly who I was. "Thank you," I said. Then I paused. To the women who built the house and were asked to sit in the kitchen. Never again. The words settled in the air like something final and freeing, not angry, not bitter, just true. We raised our glasses again. Not high, not dramatic, just enough. I sat back down, not at the edge, not off to the side, right at the head of the table. My chair. No one had placed me there. I had taken it because it was mine to begin with. The conversation picked up again. Someone joked about overcooked bread. Someone else asked for the recipe. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fancy. But it felt like family. Not the kind you're born into. The kind you choose. The kind that chooses you back. As the night went on, the air turned cooler, but no one rushed to leave. They stayed pouring another glass, telling one more story, laughing in that easy way people do when they know they're safe. I looked around and saw faces that weren't trying to perform. We weren't trying to impress, just people being human together. And me, right there among them. Not behind a swinging door, not behind a tray of shrimp, not forgotten. When I finally blew out the last candle, the wax had pooled in a soft gold puddle. I didn't feel tired. I felt full. And I knew. This was the beginning. Not of revenge, not of recovery, but something honest, something whole, something mine.